Coogs house. I think we're finally going to be able to go live. Let's jump on into this stuff with the number one team in the Big 12.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, on the road today for another edition of Locked On Coogs. If you're making this your first listen of the day, it's a little late for that, but thank you. Make sure you subscribe down below. We're doing a giveaway I think we're doing 500. I think once you get past 2,000, that's what the algorithm would say to do, is 500. They go a little faster. Anyway, hit subscribe. Help us get to that next 2,500 mark. Like, comment the videos to know that you're in that contest and give something away. Today, the Houston Cougars beat the Baylor Bears 82-76 in overtime. And a little bit of breakdown of that game. First, with a live show, I want to make sure comment. Can we hear me? Yeah, I think so. And yes, I'm going to keep this just across the bottom, as Jazz07G points out. This is probably going to be the number one team in the country come Monday's AP poll for a number of reasons. I think that's going to be the last segment. The second segment I want to do today is looking at what Houston did beat Baylor in this game, beating that zone. A little bit different zone than they'd shown throughout the season. At this point, Baylor kind of drew something up on the chalkboard to see if it would stick or not. And then second segment, I talked some about the tale of two halves. And Kelvin Zam says in the postgame, it actually kind of felt like three halves. And so I think we got to talk about all three halves of the basketball. Yeah, that's kind of, okay. And anyway, last but not least, we'll talk about what that national ranking looks like. So thanks for bringing that up, Jazz. Now, in this game, Houston, like I said, did win 82-76. Jalen Roberts was not the leading scorer technically. Emmanuel Sharp had 18 points. Jalen Roberts had 17 points. But, man, it felt like Jalen was the most important person on the floor. They are vacuuming behind me, so if someone can't hear me, please say so. But Jalen did a great job in multiple zone fronts that they were running defensively of finding gaps and spots within the zone, right? They were able to find J1 against a 1-3-1 zone, the two, like what we would call corner pockets, down that dunker spot area where the back guy kind of has to make a decision. Found ways to get him open those areas where he could distribute and score the basketball. I was really surprised in this game that he only ended up with 4 assists. I thought he had some great passes from that back line. And really, we got to see like what makes J1 Roberts so important to what Houston does this year on offense. He really is like a tremendous passer out of the high and low post. Great kick out to Sharp from 3 earlier. Post-to-post passes to Francis and Tugler late. Really did a great job in all aspects of passing the basketball around in that one. I was really impressed by how they kept feeding the beast, so to speak, against different zones. For what it's worth, Baylor's been a 2-3 zone team a lot of the season. Occasional flip it to a 3-2 zone. Against Houston, they came out for the majority of the first half in a 1-3-1 zone. So one guy playing up top, 3 guys across the middle with one of them not leaving the paint, and then one guy in the back line deep. They were occupying the guy in the lane with the guy at the nail or free throw line area. Off you're on TV, that 1845 spot, it was what it was. And there was typically like an Emmanuel or an LJ, somebody could score, and then they get the ball behind it and put the backline guy kind of in a tough spot where Jay wanted to make the quick decision, either score it or drop it off. There were a couple times, obviously, early in the game where it looked like Houston didn't know 1-3-1 was coming because they hadn't shown a whole lot of 1-3-1. They hadn't shown a whole lot of 1-3-1 lately. And for what it's worth, it looked like they adjusted pretty well. Wanted a big run to take an early half lead. I think it was up to 17 points at one point. And ultimately came away with a big halftime lead that kind of felt like they're going to run away with this thing. Baylor went to the locker room, came back out and ran a lot more 3-2 zone in the second half, as well as some man-to-man kind of stuff. That was their big adjustment, was we got to find some way to make sure the backline guy didn't get screwed back there. And what Houston did instead was they just put J1 in the middle of the floor, right? And they found different ways to get him more like in the mid lane and those kind of areas. There was also different times you saw drivers where like Shed would drive and find Javier Francis in that middle of the floor area to get a drop off. Houston found ways, they missed some shots to start the second half, but Houston found ways consistently to create what I would call good offense from a process perspective, meaning they got good shots in various spots that kind of broke down the zone. Houston didn't shoot the ball. It didn't feel like they shot the ball super well in this game, but they did end up shooting 47.5% from the field. I think it's because so much of those makes in the first half. They kind of fall back to the second half. I think the big deal was really they shot, 6 of 21 from 3 in this game. And honestly, the majority of those makes were also in the first half. And so it felt like, oh no, they're on a zone. We're missing threes. The lead's evaporating. What's going to happen? The defense here in offense got some tough baskets in it. Defensively, it looked like to me, honestly, Houston just got in foul trouble and kind of got beat at their own game with being a little over-aggressive at times. Ultimately, Baylor got to 76. They played extra 4 minutes to do it, or extra 5 minutes to do it right in overtime. But honestly, like Houston's total foul count here, committed 19 fouls. Baylor called for 17, but committed several down the stretch there at the end to committed several down the end to get the free throw game going. I couldn't find a clever way to say that. But throughout the entire game, Houston's offense was able to find ways to beat the zone. I thought it was really interesting in the first half when Houston was hammering the 1-3-1, right? Finding ways to get that backline guy in trouble. They put Malik Wilson back there at one point. Different lengthy kind of guys, the kind of guard type to put him in a lot of trouble as far as athleticism was concerned. And ultimately, Houston was able to find different spots, soft spots, shoot over the top of it in the first half, et cetera. I have to say, in the first half, though, when Baylor was like, we have to get out of this zone, let's just go man, let's just get to halftime going man, it looked like they couldn't do that either, because then Jamal Shea just went straight by Ray J. Dennis or whomever was in front of him on the way to the basket in man-to-man defense. So they couldn't do that either. And if you can't zone or man Houston, if you're having trouble with Houston's offense, I don't know how you're going to beat Houston come late February, early March, right? Like as we're getting to the most crucial part of the season, again, from a process perspective, I was incredibly impressed with the kinds of shots Houston was able to find. Now, as far as individual scoring performances, I mentioned J1 Roberts, felt like he had as impactful an offensive game as possible, from being in the right spots at the right time, finding guys, scoring himself, etc. But Emmanuel Sharp had a great first half. He had 18 points in the game, but he attacked the rim. He shot the three well. Missed a couple threes in the second half. That obviously would have been nice to knock one of those down, not have to play overtime. But on the whole, his aggression meant that, like Jacoby Walter, star guy at Baylor, going to be a one-and-done freshman, super impressive guy. He had to come, like he couldn't cheat down in the zone and sag into the lane. He had to make sure he stayed out to cover Sharp, right? Obviously, LJ Cryer knocked down his own 3 of 7 threes, the same kind of thing. Really was impressed. Nice timing, Kendall. I was really impressed by Malik Wilson's performance against the zone as well. Malik in a zone, I think intuitively as a coach would be like, they're running zone, not going to be his game. He's not a shooter, not even really a mid-range shooter. He's more of a driver and those kinds of things, and all the zone packs in. But he was so quick and so athletic and so good in his decision-making that honestly, he was able to stay in the game even though he only had the 3 points and 3 rebounds. His defense was obviously super valuable with his length, and then they weren't like losing anything with him on offense because they were going to put him at like the 4 spot against that back line. And I would have been worried about him otherwise, but his quickness and quick decision-making really helped speed up this game. Now, I want to talk some in the second segment about all of the different halves, because I put tale of 2 halves, but Kelvin just now in the post-game called it a tale of 3 halves, or said that there were 3 halves. I teach history, not math, but I didn't know there were 3 halves and things. But first, I want to talk about if you're trying to halve things yourself, or just trying to save money, Avoda is the place to do it. All kinds of like grocery bills or Target runs or whatever kind of shopping you're doing. Avoda is a free app that gives you most cash back every time you shop hundreds of items from grocery stores, blue supplies, toys, etc. You make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Avoda user saves $256 per year. That can cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, so that you can buy that thing you've been eyeing or that trip you've been dying to go to, or just go to that fancy restaurant in downtown Houston you're trying to get to. So join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands of retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and lots more. Right now, Avoda is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Avoda by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store, Google Play Store, download the free Avoda app to start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA. The Google Play or App Store, use code LOCKEDONCollege. Save money today. All right, so this game, most notably, was a tale of all the halves, right? Houston was up big at halftime, and I said that they dominated in the first half. But I think all of us anticipated Baylor being at home. The crowd in here was nuts. This is, frankly, Sampson said in the postgame himself, so I'm not giving them too much credit, a very well-built stadium as far as very vertical stadium, 7,500 seats, but it sounds super loud because they're all on top of one another and on top of you on the floor. And as soon as they started that run in the second half, they're popping balloons, they're waving over there. As soon as they started around the second half, it felt like, oh man, this is going to snowball. And it just felt like the longer the game went, the more problems Houston was going to have. Obviously, the most breathing moment there was at the nervous moment there was at the end of the second half when Massey, the big freshman guy, would probably also be a one and done, frankly. Talked to one guy more so in that later maybe, but thinks that he might be a pro as well, Massey. And he makes it and one. He's into it. The crowd's into it, etc. He's going to line 3.4 seconds, something like that, and free throw would win the game. He misses it, and then we all think Jamal Shead has won the game. In the stadium, maybe it's because it was quiet, because it was Houston scoring, obviously, but a couple guys next to me, obviously, on media row, oh, man, and then it looked late, and the replay showed it was late. But that third half that Sampson's talking about is the overtime. So if we're going to call it a tale of three halves, in the first half, Baylor comes out, 1-3-1 zone is their game plan, and Houston's ready for it. Houston pounces. Then Baylor gets back to their bread and butter in the second half defensively, goes to the 3-2 zone. Houston still got good shots to me, but looked dead-legged, tired. Shots didn't fall. On the road as well, right? So you don't have the extra boost of energy from your home crowd. And it looked like the thing was going to go off the wheels, right? Defensively, I would argue that Houston actually still played fairly well. I mean, they had four guys, because none ended up in 11 after overtime. But four guys in double figures. It was the Jacoby Walter show at 23 and Ray J. Dennis at 21. But outside of those four guys scoring the basketball, then Bridges had 17 and Nunn had 11. I mean, Massey had just the two at the end. And Ojuana had just two early on in the same kind of situation as a big guy. They didn't have anyone else score the basketball is what I'm getting at, right? So they made tough shot makers make tough shots at home and got to overtime with that strategy. And frankly, while Jacoby Walter made his 23 points and kid to pro, etc., they were very difficult shots. I don't think anyone I know the camera angle is super high up there or whatever while you watch it on TV, but those shots, turnaround fadeaways at the nail, hand in his face three, shooting over outstretched Emmanuel Sharps and Jamal Shead hands. Great shooting, scoring points by him, really making tough shots. As Kendall Taylor here says, Baylor did a really job. That was a great game. Honestly, they made tough shots, and you're going to make more of those at the home. And so they go through a second half, making their tough shots. Houston can't get, Baylor's a more comfortable defense when they normally run. Houston can't make their shots. They get to overtime. And I was a whole lot like Max here. Max says, I have no clue why, but I thought we lost in reverse that buzzer beater because it felt like in the second half, Houston was just holding on to the lead they built in the first half and just watching it slowly chip away. And so it felt like an extra few minutes just meant it was going to be too much time, right? Whereas if that buzzer beater counted, we'd have somehow escaped. But what it did look like ended up happening is they came inside, and honestly, it looked like to me, and looking at their huddle, like Houston realized they were not going to get the buzzer beater to count pretty quickly in the review process. I don't know if it was someone in their half, huddle with an iPad, they put up on the board. The boards are behind me like that on both ends. Pretty quickly, I realized, okay, this isn't going to count. We're going overtime. And it was like they just all, I don't know what Sampson said before the overtime. He didn't give a whole lot of clues to that in the post game. But they all were just like, right? They just breathed, and they looked ready to go in the second half. Looked more like themselves in the overtime. Looked more like themselves. Jamal Shead attacked. He had trouble scoring the basketball, but he opened up things for others when he did it. And then ultimately, they got a small lead, overtime short. Baylor start fouling to get the ball back, and Houston made their free throws. Emmanuel Sharp went 3 of 4 from the line. LJ Cryer went 6 of 6. And man, oh man, while we're on LJ Cryer, it was a great stadium, great home atmosphere. They were relentless with Cryer. They were doing a silent thing to start the game where they were not going to cheer until Baylor scored. but they would break that whenever Crier touched the ball to boo him and then go back to silence because Houston stopped them the first couple possessions of the game. And then eventually Baylor scored, and it was just raucous. There were moments throughout the second half, like the Swag Surf song came on. I tweeted out that the table I was sitting at was shaking. It was so loud in this stadium. Really, really impressive atmosphere for sure. And Crier, as I say Baylor alum, you don't have to graduate to be an alum, right? As the Baylor alum, he got the brunt end of it and finished with 12 points on finished with 15 points on a pretty solid day, right? Looked a little nervous at the start, missed a couple of shots he usually makes. On the whole, though, I think that up and down first half, second half, overtime is really indicative of a team that's ready to win in March. And that's why I want to talk about the tale of two halves is coming out with, not your best ball, not your best shooting day, and the other team is having a crazy good shooting day at their gym, able to win anyway. Be tough enough to play through it, to play through all the adversity, all the things going wrong. When you had multiple guys in foul trouble, Sharp and Francis both had 4. Francis had foul trouble early, barely got to play in the first half, honestly. So all of those things working against you. And then you had Francis in the overtime period playing like incredible NBA level pro defense at the rim. Verticality, straight up not fouling, jumping up both hands up, taking shots to the chest, taking physical play, and just being the big dominant body inside that we know he can. Was really, really impressed by the way that this team bounced back. And as Kendall says here, Kendall asked if it's the best win of the year. It feels like it. And I know that winning in Provo was also hard. I know beating Iowa State last Monday was also hard. This is, for all intents and purposes, a team that feels like a top 10 team and an 11th team in the country. Came into their gym. They had to have it, and you took it. Definitely, I would say it's the most impressive win of the day. I might be, the game just ended a second ago, so maybe I'm sitting here a little bit like hyperbolic. But I think there's a lot of arguments for this to be the best win of the year because of that roller coaster cross half and weathering all of those storms. Being able to play through all of that really, really showed a toughness that indicates a team ready to make a big, big run. I mean, this is a Houston team that will be number 1 in the AP poll on Monday. They were number 2 right now. They've won 2 top 15 games, 6 Iowa State at home, 11 Baylor today on the road. UConn lost. I don't even know what the other scores across country are. I don't think they matter. I don't think there's any other argument outside of Houston being the number 1 team in the country. And I want to talk about that in a second and talk about what this means from a national perspective to look at being number 1 in the country on Monday. But first, I'm feeling like winning. And if you're feeling like winning and keeping the good times rolling, you got to go to FanDuel right now. It's full-on basketball season on FanDuel. They got all kinds of big-time bets going on for the basketball season. Right now, $150 in bonus bets back if you put down and win a $5 bet. That's $150 if your $5 bet wins. I'm telling you right now, take the Rockets at home. Don't take them on the road. I don't care what the spread is. Don't take Houston on the road. The Rockets. Cougs, always take them, right? NBA bets are on quick bets, same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So nationally, I think, first of all, a big deal here is that this was a nationally televised game. All of America got to see Houston come out and play their best ball in the first half, like we just talked about. You got to see Houston weather the storm in the second half. Houston out-tough Baylor at home in the overtime period. This is a national championship level program. Scott Drew is a national championship winning coach. There's some guys on the roster in the stadium. I mean, alumni were sitting behind the bench, all kinds of national championship type of pedigree in this building. Houston came in, took their best punch, and weathered that storm. Okay, when you watch the national story on Monday, it's going to be talking about Houston's going to get the number 1 overall ranking, right? And there's going to be a lot of people talking about, do they deserve it, etc. They lost those 3 games. One of them was to Kansas. They haven't played Kansas that second time. Yada, yada, yada. I don't even know what Kansas plays today, but I do think it's interesting to look at this from like Houston can silence all of the hate, right, with a big Kansas win to end the regular season in a couple weeks. But nationally, Houston will be number 1 team in the country in the AP poll and coach poll, etc. And it'll feel like last season. The difference here is last season there was this American Conference, who have they played, et cetera, kind of thing. And now it's like Houston's winning the best conference in basketball by multiple games. The big deal here will be is you just, as Covan Sampson said last year when Houston had it, you just rent that number one team in the country spot. You can't let up when Cincinnati comes to our place for a whiteout game on Tuesday, right? You can't let up. You can't let up when you go to Oklahoma and be like, oh, they've kind of had a down month or so. We'll be okay. You can't. They were a top 15 team in the country at one point earlier this season, right? You can't let up when you see Kansas later this year. You're like, oh, they've been off on the road, right? You can't let up. You can't let up in the first round of the Big 12 tournament. I mean, it's going to be in Kansas City. Be a tough go of it. Now, I will say amongst a lot of different things, nationally, what this means is that target gets bigger, that bullseye gets bigger, those moments get more tense, right? As I saw a year ago, the difference now being like Houston will be on national TV the rest of the way, right? Whereas like Houston a year ago, yeah, they're number one team in the country, but like the Tulane game ain't going to be on TV, right? Those kinds of things. I look at this though as like the badge of honor with that big like target on their back. I think it's a big thing moving forward for them. I think it's a big thing for this program. You got top recruits in the country like Mercy Miller coming in next year. You got to, continue that trend as recruiting goes forward in 2025 class, 6 class, etc. You also, I'm sorry, this vacuum is efficient and the guy's doing his job, but it's really so I feel like nationally what this means is that the rest of the world, if not the country, is going to get to see Houston for what it is. They're going to get to see the culture, the toughness, etc. Because you can't not have Houston in those spots now. You can't not have Houston at the top of the country now. You can't not have Houston on national TV. You can't not have Houston on all of your panels talking about best team in America, who's going to win the Final Four, etc. You can't not have Jamal Shead at your Player of the Year conversations. You can't not have Jawan Roberts or Javier Francis in defensive play. Like, you can't not have those kinds of things because Houston has seized the limelight, taken it away from other people. It also means that if this continues, right, you get the Big 12 tournament as number one seed, right? The Big 12 tournament is going to be a series of matchups, so it's nice to have those because you theoretically get the worst team, but matchups can be hard. I think like TCU is a tough matchup for Houston, even though they're not the second or third best team in the conference. It's just a tough matchup for Houston, right? And so where different people end up is going to be tough. That's all down the road, but it does matter. It also means that, frankly, depending on how your next couple games really to end the regular season go, and I think Houston should be favored across the board in them. You've seen in the past with the school I'm sitting at, specifically at Baylor. You've seen in the past that honestly, sometimes that final game. Can you hear Ryan? They're talking. Those final games in your like conference tournament don't matter as much sometimes to some of the people on the selection committee because they're like, I have too many things to watch that week. I can't fit all the games in before I have to decide on Sunday. Sometimes they don't even watch the conference championship games. Like winning right now matters so much. That like you could see Houston with number one overall seed. I think across the board, if Houston as long as Houston is ranked ahead of other Big 12 teams or other SEC teams, and as things continue, they ought to be. They'll end up in the South Regional because they'll be one of the top 4 teams in America unless something crazy happens, right? And nationally, the way they do it is, okay, they go the number 1 overall seed, where do you want to play? Number 2 overall, second number 1 seed, where do you want to play? Third number 1 seed, where do you want to play? If Houston's ahead of anyone else from the South or any other Big 12 team, they're going to end up playing the South Regional. It goes through Dallas, and that, you got to get to the second weekend, and I'm going to like make light of the first weekend, but that's seemingly just as big, right? And that's a big push for Houston as well. I don't have other comments here to respond to, but I wanted to spend the last couple minutes here before we wrap talking about these comments. E-Man was the unsung hero, tough buckets today. I thought the shot along the baseline he made it wasn't called a foul, but it was definitely an and one of the most impressive shots Houston hit on the day. Tremendous defensive effort from him on Jacoby Walter. He got in foul trouble, so should finish on him late. But I actually answered that one about Malik. Rusty says don't like the Cougs continue to blow double-digit leads. I hear that, Rusty, and I don't mean to like just always be the optimist. I think I get called that a lot, right? I do think that honestly, the trick to me there is that I also enjoy that Houston found a way to win, even though they could have folded. Juan asks if I'd been in the South Regional games in Dallas. So, folks, I'm Houston born, but I actually live like middle of nowhere, closer to Dallas, I guess, middle of nowhere. But I would apply for I applied for just like you have to apply for credentials and stuff. So if they have me, I would be there. Thanks, Juan. Feels so much better as a hate Baylor. Wish we'd won by 50. I think there is a big deal in hating Baylor, and it's funny how these two teams always end up like this, whether it's like Cam and I had a fun back and forth the other day talking about like, Mac Rhodes, Ann Richards, Art Briles, now LJ Cryer, back and forth there, right? You've got the Final Four from 2021. Overtime. I saw the football team tweeted out that, something about those Waco games in overtime, and, because Houston football won in overtime here as well. All kinds of fun things back and forth across the board there. Max here says he went to Moody and it was nuts. I hadn't been to Moody. It'd be interesting to see how that goes. Booze eventually went to silent mode. It really was interesting, though, because it felt like at halftime, like if Houston come in the second half and had like, made 4 shots in the first 4 minutes, they might have won by 40. I think the crowd's kind of ready to get out of it. And then Baylor had a great start to the half to come back into it. All right, I got to get on the road. I'm going to pack things up here. I'm going to end with saying this is, as Jazz07G said, to start the number 1 team in America. It was a pleasure to watch them play in such a hostile, challenging road environment. We are shutting the place down here, it looks like. I'm going to try to – I don't know if I'm going to interrupt Ryan or not. I'm way out over here. But thank you all for tuning in to a live edition of Locked On Coogs. If you're listening to the audio edition – if you listen to the audio edition, it's probably out midday Monday. There might also be a second episode at that point. We're having some behind-the-scenes stuff on the audio side that's hopefully making for a better experience for the folks at home, but also just means we're changing gears, so things might be a little late on the audio side. Cougs 1-2, or Cougs 12, calling it now. She had its game winner to make up for this one. And the UT shot, it's about time. I'll leave it on that. Locked On Coogs is the primary Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, our Cougs, the number 1 team in the country come Monday, every day. Go Cougs.